So there I was, working on a project, which in 2026 means I was staring at the screen while AI was doing work for me. Oh, come on, I told you not to drop the database, stupid AI. When suddenly Anthropic dropped to us the new model, and then US government took it away. I still was able to burn some money on it, trying to understand its capabilities, trying to understand the costs, because it is quite an expensive model. So at first I was curious if you can even use this model as part of your Cloud Code subscription, or you would burn through the limits in a few seconds, right? Well, at the first attempt, I gave it my sort of typical task of adding dark theme to the website, and it did implement the thing. I mean, it's a pretty easy task, but it burned through 10% of my 5-hour limits, which is not great, because the same task you can do with much cheaper model, like with Sonnet or Haiku, obviously at a much less percentage of the limits. So then I thought, let's try to do something more sophisticated. For example, on the model card, Anthropic mentioned that Stripe used Fable to do code-wise migration on the 50 million lines of code base. Now, I don't have code base with 50 million lines of code, and I would imagine most of you don't have it either, but please vote in the corner if you have, or if you do or do not. I'm curious. So in my case, it was much smaller code base. I think it was around 7,000 lines of Python code, around 40,000 lines of TypeScript code. So it was essentially a monorepository with backend in Python and frontend in TypeScript. And I asked Fable to completely rewrite it into Rust, both frontend and backend. So first attempt, I tried to do it through Cloud Code subscription, and I burned through subscription pretty much around 20 to 30 minutes. All my limits were gone, and it didn't even start to implement much. So then I had to switch to API and burn through some dollars. But it actually was able to deliver, right? It was able to fully convert my initial code base of Python and TypeScript into Rust. Fable spent about 2 hours on this task. However, I didn't have to nudge it, I didn't have to do follow-ups. I got a fully functional application, minus some minor issue with the dropdown. So essentially, I gave it a task, and the model was able to do this long-running task on its own. I didn't have to do anything on my end. But it cost me more than $300 in API cost. So while Fable seems to be more intelligent, it is, as expected, more expensive. But then I thought, well, can Opus do the same? Because Opus technically is also quite a capable model. So I gave this some task to Opus. Opus unsurprisingly cost less, around $80. So roughly 4 times cheaper. However, in case of Opus, it was kind of lazy. I had to nudge it multiple times. So first, it didn't implement some pages. Some of them were returning 404. Also, some menu options were missing. So for example, notifications and profile. When I did the follow-up, of course, Opus agreed with me, said that I'm right, and that it missed a few things, and it started working again. Then I did another follow-up, because profile pages and settings did not match the original state of the UI. So I had to nudge Opus one more time. And then after that, finally, it was able to complete the rewrite from Python and TypeScript to Rust. Now, Opus did spend less time on that. It was around 70 minutes. And as I mentioned, it was $80. However, I did have to babysit it a little bit. I had to nudge it a couple times. I had to manually verify that everything works. So yeah, Opus was cheaper, but I had to intervene a few times, had to do the manual checks. So in total, I would say time consumption versus Fable was roughly the same, because if you add me being involved, if you also potentially factor in wait times between Opus finishing its work, then me going back to check it out, then doing the follow-up and so on. Overall, it would sum up to a longer time compared to Fable's 2 hours. But still, Opus cost $80, which is, I mean, for a full rewrite in a completely different language, I guess it's not bad. But I was curious if they can push it even cheaper. So if you watched my previous video, and here's a link on how to save costs by using multimodal approaches, where I combined Opus and Minimax, I was curious if I can do the same, if I can make Opus do the planning for me, and then use Minimax to do the actual implementation of switching from Python TypeScript to Rust. Unfortunately, in this case, unlike in the previous video, things didn't go that well. While Minimax was able to produce some kind of working version of the website, of the application, it did spend on that roughly about 12 hours. I will show the exact numbers here. 12 hours is just approximate, because I actually had to just leave my agents running and then come back in the morning. So it was roughly, I would say, 12 hours. And here's also the cost. But I also had to have quite a few follow-ups. And even after that, it didn't work perfectly. So you can see some examples on the screen right now. The UI looks completely off. It looks like some sort of mobile version of the website for some reason, with a lot of spaces on each side of the center column. UI elements do overlap quite a lot. To some extent, it reminded me of my first web-coded version of the website, because UI elements also were overlapping, but it was also 1 year ago. So I think I used Sonnet 4 back then. So I guess it is also kind of showing the level of current open source models and how much behind they are from the main competitors like Anthropic or OpenAI. So yeah, in the end, unfortunately, I didn't get to the completely working solution with Opus plus Minimax. Mostly the main issues were still UI, some functionality, and I didn't want to spend even more time on that, although I would imagine that if you would be willing to sacrifice some time in favor of saving some costs, you could probably still push Minimax or other cheap model to its limits and get some result. So unfortunately, in this case, multimodal approach didn't prove useful, unlike using Fable, and maybe at some point we will get Fable back, hopefully, because it does look like it's quite a leap forward in terms of quality. So there you go. Let me know in the comments if you were able to try Fable before it was banned by US government, and what were your impressions, what were your results? Were you able to maybe just like me rewrite the whole code base into a completely different language, or maybe you used Fable for something else? Let me know in the comments what were you able to do with it and how much money were you able to burn through. Now, I don't have 50 million lines of code, of 50 millions. Now, I don't have code base 50. Now, I don't have code base with 50 million lines of code. For fuck's sake. Now, I don't have code base with Now, I don't have code base with 50 million lines of code,